Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel called Zuzanareacts, where I learn all things power out with your help, and I just share my Slovak Central European point of view. And in today's video we're going to be continuing with the part 2 of the Is Consciousness Miracle discourse between Harvard scientists and Sadhguru, and in the part 1 that I'm going to link right here, we've just discussed about like who's presented the better arguments, guru or scientist. And I'm actually dying to know how the discussion is going to go. But before we get into the part 2,
please like this video and click on the subscribe button and turn on the notification. Thank you so much for your support.
Okay, so let's kick this off. I'm just going to left off where we started. So I presume now we're going to hear what the arguments are, pro and against, and a bit more of a discussion.
I certainly share the sense of wonder, of amazement, of astonishment at natural phenomena, which tempts us to use the word miracle. A seed growing into a plant, a pregnant woman giving birth to a child who grows up to be a person. These are truly wondrous, and I will sometimes, in fact, use the language of a miracle. I'll say it's a miracle. Now, I actually don't mean that it's a miracle. It is language that helps to convey my awe and wonder. But there is a big difference between literally believing that it's a miracle and using the language of miracles, namely what happens when you actually have to affect it causally. So let's say you, and I will speak to you, Sadhguru, when it comes to turning seeds into edible food, we know that many civilizations, when there was a crop failure, when there was a drought, when there was a famine, when locusts came and ate the grain, they would utter prayers, they would sacrifice a goat, sometimes they would sacrifice a virgin, they would pray for a miracle. Fortunately, you don't do that. You quite admirably have a foundation that literally gets your hands dirty. There's nothing miraculous about dirt. And you have my admiration for taking dirt seriously, because the transformation of a seed into a stalk of wheat is not a miracle. It depends on having the right dirt. And hats off to you for taking dirt seriously. Likewise, if you have the miracle of a child.
Okay, you know what I don't like? Him using the word dirt. Because Sadhguru is doing the soil thing, and I don't think it's dirt has a very negative connotation. Like, something is dirty. It's not the same as it's a soil, because I think that I wouldn't say that our crops, grows out of dirt, maybe out of soil that some may consider being dirty, but clearly it's nutritious and brings us further. Let me know what you think in the comments.
And the child has a disease like leukemia, you could pray to a saint, you could climb up the stairs of a cathedral on your knees, you could set up a shrine, you could, as we say, pray for a miracle. That would be, I would submit, an immoral thing to do, knowing that there are ways of keeping that miracle of a child in existence by giving it the right drug that would get rid of the leukemia or cure the infection. And so even treating a child as a miracle, even treating a plant as a miracle, metaphorically, poetically, when it actually comes to action, to the need to do something to perpetuate this miracle, it is very important not to take the miracle language literally, but rather to see it as a matter of cause and effect, to worry about rainfall and soil and fertilizer and farming practices, to worry about the child's health, the appropriate drugs, the appropriate nutrition, the appropriate loving environment. Now, when it comes to consciousness, this is true even more significantly. So Bala, you're a professor of anesthesia, you're an anesthesiologist. So you manipulate people's consciousness. I assume not with prayers, with seances, with sacrifices, but you actually apply physical cause and effect. You inject chemicals in people's bloodstream, you put a mask over people's faces and they breathe certain gases. If I were a patient undergoing surgery and needed general anesthesia, my consciousness would be turned off. I would very much like for it to stay off while I'm open on the operating table. I would very much like for it to come back when the operation is done. I sure hope you don't treat all of that as a miracle. I sure hope you don't say prayers. I hope you don't make sacrifices. I hope you control the mixture of gases and the timing and treat it as a matter of cause and effect. Please say yes. If you say no, I'm going to have my surgery done at Mass General, not Beth Israel Deaconess.
I think we got the distinction between what you're saying and what Sadhguru is saying. So Sadhguru wants to respond, I think. You want to pass the mic to him?
Well, I think we're coming from two different contexts. Uh, that's why I said probably in the Western religions, the word miracle is being used for lack of words, don't… because I already kind of excused myself saying I'm uncivilized. Miracle is a way of duping people. I'm not talking about the word miracle in that context, that's why I said there's a different way to look at life. If you look at everything as logical steps, our logical steps progress with whatever data we have. Nobody can claim they have data about everything that's life and the whole phenomena of creation, nobody has. Neither the religious people nor the men of science know where the existence or the cosmos begins and where it ends. Nobody knows. Hello?
Yeah.
Nobody knows. But somebody is bombastic enough to explain it all happened because of one person up there, another is trying to piece it together, piece by piece. But how many pieces ever you gather? Because today modern science is recognizing this is a ever-expanding universe. If it's an ever-expanding universe, it doesn't matter how many pieces of the jigsaw you collect, you still don't have a full picture. So in that context, I'm saying we go as far as our logic and our data takes us. From there is a blind spot which we do not know, we just hope it happens. And sometimes we have found if you do certain things happen, sometimes it doesn't happen. But the important thing is using the word miracle as a way to fool people to believe things and working through a logical process for all the phenomenal activity that we do in the world, there is no contest about that, there is no any difference about that. But coming to the consciousness, once again I would like to distinguish your awareness of yourself right now and consciousness are two different entities altogether. Your awareness is definitely a consequence of all the things that are happening in the brain. I've not looked because I don't have one, I'm only experiencing it through other people. So, I do not know all that, but definitely it's a consequence of what's happening. Things are firing up, we know. I may not know exactly where, how it's firing up, I know things are fired up within us, which is creating a certain awareness. So this awareness is a consequence of activity, not just the brain, I wouldn't go with that. I think there is a brain right across. From your toes to your head, everywhere there is different levels of brain. I don't want to call it brain, we call this mental body. There is memory and there is intelligence right across. So only if all this fires up, then you have an experience of life. How much it fires up will determine how profound an experience of life you have. This is a different aspect. We're talking about consciousness. That is not exactly an appropriate word in English language because that's the only word we have as far as I know. Normally we call this chitta. Chitta means an intelligence without memory, it has no intent. But you can create any intent for it. With the same life energy, somebody will do evil things. With the same life energy, somebody will do wonderful things because it has no intent. It's simply there, it empowers you whichever way. Let's say it's like electricity. You can make sound out of it, you can make light out of it, you can make whatever you want out of it. Just like that, the fundamental force which drives us has no intent. So, when we say consciousness, we are referring to that aspect of intelligence which has no intent because it has no memory. But if you give it memory, it will immediately gain an intent and a direction.
Thank you.
Okay, I would certainly echo and endorse and reinforce the idea that we meaning humanity, we meaning science, are ignorant of a vast array of topics. Even as we learn more, we become more aware of what we're ignorant of.
Yeah.
We have to be prepared to change our minds. That's the very nature of science, as we've just learned through living through the COVID pandemic, where in the early weeks there were all kinds of things that we believed, like you've got to wash your groceries and you can't touch your face, and that turned out even our best experts were wrong. But it's in the nature of science that best experts are wrong because we start out ignorant of everything and we have to learn it as we go along. And the more we learn, the more we realize how much there is to learn. And there's much about the functioning of the brain, to put it mildly, that we don't understand, including many of the phenomena of consciousness. But it's just crucial not to translate our ignorance into a belief in miracles. There is the well-known fallacy of the God of the gaps. That is, that which you don't understand at a particular point in scientific development, you are tempted to invoke a source of miracles, namely God. It used to be Zeus hurling thunderbolts when people didn't understand how lightning worked. It used to be life when before we had the theory of evolution. And likewise, for people who know nothing about brain science, the idea that consciousness is a miracle is very tempting. And even as we learn more, but still don't know some things, it is tempting fallacy to bring in miracles for our ignorance. But the best attitude toward ignorance is certainly humility. There are many things that science doesn't understand, but part of that humility is acknowledging there are certain things we don't understand. And it's just in the nature of us as not sub-omniscient beings. We are not divine. We do experiments. We propose hypotheses. A lot of them are wrong. We need to build bigger and bigger scientific instruments. Even when we do, there'll be questions that we can't answer. And the right attitude is there's some questions that of which we are ignorant. And that is the part of the humility is not inventing miracles to fill those gaps, but rather acknowledging that ignorance. Now, when it comes, let me switch to a question of whether there is consciousness.
Okay, I will stop here before he switches. You know what I've noticed? He says, I don't know if you guys spotted, so let me know if you did in the comments. He said, we are not divine. And he's debating the concept of miracles that is in a way open to interpretation. There is a way he is describing it and he's given definitions. Yes, from a linguistic point of view, fine. Sadhguru talked about it, fine. But then he called it that we as a scientist, I like what he was saying. Yes, and this I think what I was saying in my previous video, that we need to be humble and we need to really understand how much is it that we don't know, and that we are not the person that is speaking to us, you know, like I almost see this person as a 2D. I know nothing about him. I know that he's a cognitive psychologist, but I don't know how he grew up, where he grew up. Obviously, he has a Harvard education, so it's considered to be, quote unquote, like one of the best Ivy League schools. But like you're not able to really picture and understand what people are saying until you actually really been them. But he said what I wanted to get to, that but we are not divine. As in scientists, we are not divine. So in essence, he has confirmed that because if he's a scientist, that he cannot believe in divinity, he cannot believe in God, right? Because he is a scientist, because he doesn't believe in quote unquote miracles. But then he says that, but we are not divine. And for scientists, what is divinity? I would love to know his definition. To me, it seems a bit on the woo-woo, wishy-washy type of things that he doesn't believe in, but we are not divine. I don't know if you guys have spotted that, let me know.
Through the body as opposed to activity in the brain. And admittedly, it is certainly true that the English language does not give us enough words to point to the different phenomena that we think about, ask questions about, seek to explain. And philosophers have tried to refine our vocabulary. There's no reason to think that ordinary conversation would provide the vocabulary to make sense of consciousness any more than it does for the various tissues of the body, the various molecules in the brain, the various phenomena of physics. You got to invent jargon. When it comes to consciousness, you distinguish, Sadhguru, between consciousness and awareness. And there is indeed a distinction between access to information, I don't know whether awareness is the right word for that, and the subjectivity, the qualitative aspect of consciousness, sometimes called the raw feels, just the saltiness of salt and the redness of red.
Okay, I'll just pause on this guy. So sometimes when you look at people, and you look at like in this kind of footage and the guy is doing this, and you might be thinking, yeah, he's disagreeing with that. But you don't know where this footage has been taken, at what part of the video, and it's just been, put there maybe to build a narrative. Do you know what I mean? So when you're looking at videos and you're trying to read people's like even body language, as you guys try to read mine, sometimes to me it's hilarious how some people could have even arrived at certain conclusions. So this is why it's always important to check yourself first and saying, okay, so she's doing that. What could that mean? Like, what could that possibly mean? Is my assumption right? And how am I certain that this is right? Like before you're even speaking about that. But what I wanted to say about this one is that even though he's agreeing, I don't know. And again, this could be my bias, and maybe you guys, and I would be curious what you think. Let me know in the comments. It's like it feels like that there is an authority of science over religion or spirituality, whatever you want to call it. And it feels like he's talking from a position of authority. It's just maybe it's just me. I mean, maybe again, I've just talked a lot about biases and how we look at and read things. I might be completely wrong, but I would be curious to see. It's just like, yeah, it feels like he's a bit of like, I'm above that because I'm a scientist. So don't know. Maybe I'm reading that wrong.
And so on. So awareness, since it is tempting for specialists, including philosophers, to invent jargon and of necessity, because the phenomena you study in depth aren't just going to have labels sitting around from everyday conversation. For example, the philosopher Ned Block has distinguished between what he calls phenomenal consciousness and access consciousness. Access consciousness may or may not be what you were referring to as awareness. Access consciousness would be the jargon term for having access to information. So as just an example, I do have access consciousness, say, to the color of your suit, to the presence of people in this room. I can talk about it, I can imagine it, I can answer questions about it. I don't have access to the particular geometric shape on my retina that your suit projects. I know that's in the brain, but I just can't talk about it. I don't have access to the exact sequence of muscle contractions of my tongue that allow me to speak. My brain does somewhere. It's unconscious. There's no need for me to think about it because it's automatic and it happens. So there's a lot of activity in the brain to which we don't have access, and there is some to which we do have access. So that's one refinement of the vocabulary of consciousness that we inherited just from the English language. The contrast to access consciousness is phenomenal consciousness, and that is the qualitative, the so-called hard problem, sometimes called sentience. Although there too, sadly, English doesn't give us precise technical terms to make sense of our experience. When a computer scientist at Google thought that one of their large language models was sentient, he was using sentient in a sense that is very different from the one that I think philosophers would want to reserve it for, namely the actual phenomenal or subjective or qualitative aspect of consciousness. There's no way, no matter how smart your AI program is, you can't really know whether there's someone home actually feeling something as opposed to it just producing intelligent responses in context. That's another aspect. It's another reason why the hard problem is called hard, just because it's very hard to know how could we ever tell whether a perfectly lifelike robot, a perfectly intelligent AI program, was consciousness in the phenomenal sense, in the sentient sense, in the qualitative sense of there's someone somewhere in there that's actually feeling something. Like, how would you know? And in fact, this is often another way in which we humans make sense of these conundrums that are not intuitive is we explore them in fiction, in science fiction, in the fictions that philosophers create called thought experiments. But as an example that may be familiar to a number of you, there was several decades ago in Star Trek: The Next Generation, there was a plot that revolved around whether it would be morally acceptable to disassemble Lieutenant Commander Data, an android, to reverse engineer him. Would that just be dismantling a machine, or would it be snuffing out a consciousness, a sentience, a living life? Now, it's great entertainment to think it through, and one of the things fiction does is it allows us to ponder philosophical puzzles. That being another good way to illustrate it, and another way of showing that our vocabulary, as we use it in ordinary conversation, may just not be up to the task of the sharp distinctions we want to make as thinkers, as scientists, as philosophers, as thoughtful people. Finally, one more observation. I think that there is a way to make sense of the question of, is, say, consciousness distributed through the body, or does it consist of brain activity? I think the answer is brain activity. And we can actually imagine the circumstances that tease them apart. I mean, when someone steps on my toe, I feel the pain in my toe, but there's every reason to think that what is happening is a pattern of activity in my brain. I localize it in my toe, but the crucial events, the crucial natural physical events, consist of activity in the brain. How do we know? Because often amputees will have phantom limb pain. They'll still feel the foot, even though there ain't no foot. And that can happen. We have all kinds of bodily hallucinations. We have out-of-body experiences. We have dreams where it's not the body. People who are quadriplegic, where the body is no longer functioning, still have full consciousness, often of their body in phantom limb experiences. Conversely, if the brain is active, if someone is in a deep vegetative state, if they're in a deep coma, we can't know because there's no one to ask. But the fact that their foot continues to have blood flowing into it does not mean that there is someone somewhere feeling that foot. As best we know, if the brain areas for the foot are not active, there is no one or nothing that corresponds to consciousness of the foot. So the consciousness doesn't need the foot, it does need the brain, as far as we know, and that's a reason to conclude that consciousness consists in brain activity, not be distributed through the body. Now, of course, the body is connected to the brain via nerves. Because there are sensory transducers, there are little itty-bitty cells in the skin that respond to changes in temperature and pressure by transmitting nervous impulses to the brain. Likewise, in the eye, there are photoreceptors, rods and cones that transduce light energy into neural activity. There are hair cells in the inner ear that transduce vibrations into neural impulses, but there always has to be something that converts the body, the energy impinging on the body, into neural impulses that are carried by nerves into the brain, or there's no consciousness. How do we know? Well, if, again, you're an anesthesiologist, even in the case of the anesthesia that my dentist does, injects a chemical into my jaw and he can drill at my teeth and I don't feel anything. I mean, the teeth are still there, but no more consciousness of pain in my teeth, thank goodness. Likewise, if there is nerve damage, if there's a pinched nerve, if there is a severed nerve, if there's severed spinal cord, the part of the body that cannot send physical signals to the brain, there is no longer any consciousness of, suggesting that it's the brain via information transmitted into the brain that is the seat of consciousness.
Okay, I will stop here. Very curious what he's going to respond. But there was one thing I just wanted to catch, so before I forget. There, he told a lot around all these things are explored, like something that we can't explain, or in science fiction. It's very interesting because sometimes when you look in the science fiction, which is something that I personally don't quite like. I don't like fantasy stuff. But it usually is from these movies that you kind of see what we're predicting as the future, and about the whole Simpsons phenomena, right? The show that they've predicted quite a good couple of things. So yeah, I just wanted to add that. Let's continue.
Everything that we perceive through five sense organs, of course, it is processed in the brain, which is not just today's understanding, it's always been so in most parts of the world. And the brain that we're talking about, where was it manufactured? It was manufactured in this body, by this body. We did not buy it or import it from somewhere. It was made from this body. It didn't come to us from elsewhere. So the evolution of the brain within the individual human being happened in this body. So essentially, the way we look at this is, we don't look at brain as something different, it is just body with a different levels of functionality, significant levels of functionality. A whole lot of people may be walking around this university without their brains functioning, but their livers, kidneys and hearts are functioning. Without that, they wouldn't be walking. So, I'm not questioning whether the brain is significant in doing all these processes, no question at all about that. But is it the be-all of everything? No, because there are still so many aspects of life which are unexplained. So someday when we have the data, we will explain. But you can gather data only about physical aspects of life. So essentially, if we have concluded that the whole existence is just physical, well, today morning we were talking to all the physicists, they're all talking about over 90% or 99% of everything seems to be empty, it is not physical. So this, in the yogic culture, we look at it this way. We see that everything was nothing. It was called Shiva. That means it was that which is not. This that which is not went into a ripple because of a certain influence of energy, and once it went into a ripple, it gathers memory. Once it gathers memory, it finds an intent and a direction from this various miraculous levels of… I'm using that word very consciously, miraculous levels of multiple millions and millions of forms of creation happened. Just the life on this planet is so absolutely mind-boggling that the numbers and the variety of life that's happened, if you look at the whole cosmos, we don't even know what is what. So, this happened and this is still functioning in every bit of life, in everything. Even in a single atom, over 99% is supposed to be, or 93 or 94% is supposed to be empty. What is this emptiness? So, this is what we refer to as consciousness, which is the basis of everything. Well, you can define it as space, you can call it as nothingness, you can call it as dark matter or dark energy, whatever. But essentially, it is that which is not. When we say that which is not, it is not physical in nature, which is fundamental to all physical creation. So, can we explain this logically? Yes, to a certain point we can, maybe all the way we can, but explanation and reality are two different things. We can always explain everything. We can always explain the whole phenomena of human life. But the reality of human life is totally different. It's experienced by different people in different ways. Let's say there are two siblings, same genetic material, same home, same school, but they don't function the same way because the way they receive, the way they process is different. Well, that is not what we're talking about, but the important thing to understand is human experience is coming not necessarily only from the brain activity, but to what extent do we delve into that aspect of life which has no information but has intelligence. When this intelligence fires, suddenly human beings do things that other people never thought is possible. That's when people think it's miraculous. I'm not using the word miracle in the religious context of saying, I did something like that and it happened, not in that context. But something that you cannot find logical explanation because, as you said, what's that, God gap, is it? What was the… huh? God of the gaps. No, we are not talking about God of the gaps either. The gaps are there because of ignorance, that we know, but there are dimensions of life which are not physical in nature. What is not physical in nature, neither can you define nor describe nor perceive through five senses. Right now, everything that we know is through five senses. What is wrong with five senses? Nothing wrong. It is just that for different creatures, these senses are different. What is light for you, for a whole lot of creatures, it is darkness. What is darkness for you is light for them. Because the sense organs are designed as it is necessary for our survival process. Based on your survival requirement, accordingly it is designed. So what you see, what a grasshopper sees, what a dragonfly sees are very different because these sense organs are designed for our survival process. And our survival process may be very different from one creature to another. In that context, what we call as brain is just that receptive process or that reception place where it receives all these impulses from senses. To what extent means in a day, even if you walk around the place unconsciously or reasonably unconsciously, still you're receiving, millions of gigabytes of memory going into your system, and all this is being stored, processed, whatever. In some minds it may be well done, in some minds it may be randomly done, but it is all being recorded, nobody is missing it. So, this process is a tremendous process for the brain to handle. But the fundamental existence of who we are, is it only because of brain-derived neurological activity or electrical makeup of things? That would be believing in a miracle. That's not a miracle, that is a simple process which is creating fantastic things for us, no question. Fantastic things. It is done to ourselves and to the world in many, many ways. Nobody is questioning the efficacy of that brain. But the important thing is, when we talk about my brain, obviously we are talking about someone who owns the brain also. You don't say, I'm the brain, you're saying, this is my body, this is my brain. This means there is somebody beyond that. Is this a body? No. An entity that we cannot define, an entity that we cannot describe, an entity that we cannot perceive through sense perception, but we know we are here, we know we exist. Well, if we think it's only because we are thinking and processing we exist, no, we exist even without that.
Okay, I'll stop sharing. I had, in the meantime of shooting this, I had a big issue with the camera, so I had to switch different cameras. Life's easy when you're doing this by yourself and you can't figure out what's happening. But man, this is a very, very interesting conversation. As he was talking about, I actually wanted to make one point when he was talking about like dragonflies and different animals perceive sensory information differently, which I think is very much true. And it just brings me to the point of, I mentioned Matthias Di Stefano. He claims that he's a portal that he remembers, and he has a program on Gaia TV. But he talks about the fact that, that we've assigned the meaning to the light. It's just because of the survival that people on the other planets, they don't have the same meaning to the light, so we almost associate it with God, etc. But it's not quite like that, and I think that's kind of what Sadhguru is also mentioning here. Very interesting. I think he's just really trying to drive the the debate between the consciousness and the awareness. And yeah, I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation. Please do let me know what was your takeout out of the part 2. Who do you believe more, the scientist or Sadhguru? Let me know in the comments below. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching. If you did like this video, please give a thumbs up, share, like, and subscribe to this channel. And I'll see you in the part 3. Until then, please do take care. Sending much love. Bye bye.